Hey everyone, I'm David Aragona with another episode of Horses to Watch, taking a look back at last week's races from Belmont at the Big A, trying to find some horses that encountered adversity in their trips and could be worth betting back in the future. And I'll be honest, looking back at last week's races at Aqueduct, there weren't too many obvious trip horses that jumped out at me. I was really just looking for some horses that had subtle trouble or subtle difficulties to overcome in their races. And those are the kind of trips that can actually be most lucrative when you want to bet them back because they tend to fly under the radar. So I'm going to be talking about some fairly subtle areas that these horses might have not been able to achieve their best result last time as we go through these three replays from Aqueduct the last week. We'll begin with a race from last Friday's card, June 14th. The second race of the day, it's a maiden special weight event for the 2-year-old fillies going 5 furlongs on the dirt. Let's break these runners from the gate, focusing on the number 6, Bossy Pants. And you can see right from the beginning, she breaks slowly. I'm not going to show the head on of this race, but she actually has a couple of horses come over on her at the start, so her path gets taken away, and she breaks slowly, sort of a double whammy of trouble at the start of this race. And I do think she deserves some credit for what she does after this, because she races right up into traffic, trying to make up some ground that she had lost coming out of the gate here. The problem with trying to make up ground in this race is the eventual winner is the heavy favorite, the number 9 Complexion, and she set some pretty slow to moderate fractions for this short of a trip. And you can see the number 6 Bossy Pants in those purple silks towards the back of the pack. She's kind of striding high with her knees, not looking totally comfortable, a little green for a first-time starter, maybe reacting to that kickback. But I like what she does here, coming inside of horses at the top of the stretch to finish well between these rivals, getting up for third. Really had no chance to do any better than that, since the top 2 in this race were just able to control the pace throughout, and the winner came home in sub 12 seconds for her final eighth of a mile. A closer really has no chance to make up ground into that kind of closing split. So I still think that the number 6 Bossy Pants did some good things to overcome that start, get up for third in this race. Didn't earn much of a speed figure for this debut effort, but this feels like the kind of building block where she might be able to do a lot better in her next start. Maybe that will come in a maiden special weight event at Saratoga next month. Next, let's move on to some races from Saturday. Race 8 on the Saturday, June 15th card at Belmont at the Big A is a New York bred allowance race, nominators of one other than the condition, going 6 furlongs on the outer turf course for fillies and mares. Let's break these runners from the gate. We're going to focus on the number 5, Stolen Future, and this is probably the most subtle trip I'm going to talk about on this podcast, and was kind of borderline about whether to even talk about this race, because the number 5, Stolen Future, the only trouble that she really has in this race, you're going to see right here, she's got to steady back very slightly. I mean, that's just barely even a moment of trouble. I hesitate to even call it trouble. But the real issue with her is not what happened just there. It's that she gets to get relegated to a 3-wide trip, chasing some pretty honest splits in a race that ultimately falls apart. And you can see right here, she's not that close to the pace yet. She dropped about 3 lengths off the pace after vying for the lead in that opening furlong. But right about here, she moves out into the 3 path, is trying to advance outside of horses. Armad Ortiz isn't doing anything wrong. This is the kind of ride he has to give this filly, but the race is going to fall apart towards the end. The number 10 is the eventual winner. She was saving ground around the turn, tips out at the top of the stretch. The runner-up is that horse all the way on the left of the screen, is going to close from last place to get up for second in here. I just think Stolen Future runs pretty well, considering that she had to make the first move into a race that was falling apart, and she's going to stay on for third here. This is a Mark Casse trainee who was making her second start of the year, getting back on the turf. I think it was a step forward from her last race when she first got back on the turf this spring. And also, this is a 6 furlong affair, and this filly really strikes me as one that is going to appreciate turning back slightly to the 5.5 furlongs at Saratoga. You can see in that replay, she's got some size to her. She's got a big, long stride, but for whatever reason, she's just the kind of horse that doesn't seem to be able to sustain her bids over that 6 furlong distance. She actually looked like she might have won her return race 2 back, opening up a 2-length lead in the middle of the stretch, but she really hit the wall in the final furlong. I think turning back to the 5.5, if she's able to work out a good stalking trip, could really work for her at Saratoga. And I think she ran just slightly better than the result might indicate in this last race. So she's just a horse that I have my eye on when racing switches over to Saratoga in the coming month, because I think the configuration up there could really work for her. Finally, let's talk about another race from that Saturday card that has a little bit more meat on the bones in terms of trips. This is the 10th race of the day. It's a grade 2 Better Roses going 7 furlongs for the fillies and mares. Let's break these runners from the gate. First, watching the head on for the number 4, Morning Matcha. And you can see she got slammed coming out of the starting gate by the horse right inside of her, the number 3, Exceed. And actually, Exceed is going to be the eventual winner of this race. There was no inquiry or anything like that. Typically, the stewards don't look at what happens at the start of this race, but it is fair to argue that Exceed took away the path of both Morning Matcha as well as the number 5, Just Catherine, who you will see in this replay might have run the best race of all as she overcomes that poor start, getting her path taken away from her at the gate to actually close for second, only beaten a half length by Exceed when all is said and done. And while Just Catherine's trip is worth taking note of, I want to focus more on the number 4, Morning Matcha, because she really took the worst of it coming out of the starting gate. She is a closer by nature, but you still don't want to get slammed coming out of the gate the way that she was and wind up at the back of the pack due to a reason like that. She actually advances pretty well coming around the far turn here. That's her at the back of the pack, traveling inside of that last flight of horses. The problem is her jockey, Michael Sanchez, is just going to really never be able to get her into the clear. She's a horse who wants to make that big looping move around the quarter pole and be in position to take a race over by the time they get to the top of the stretch. That's the running style she has most success with. And you can see right here, she is locked in, trying to follow Just Catherine, but she's behind and between horses, and she's on her left lead, just not looking totally comfortable, never able to switch over and really level off in this race. She loses some position there. And once again here, he has a brief moment where the path opens up for him. He tries to send her on through. She starts to accelerate a little bit, but then the number 9 comes out in her path. It gets taken away again. And she could just really never build up any momentum through the stretch of this Bed of Roses. When all was said and done, Morning Matcha was only beaten just over a length for third place in this race. Maybe she wasn't going to win the race, but I think she's the kind of horse that could have been in the money if she had been able to get into the clear and make that wide looping move like, let's say, Just Catherine did, staying out in the clear to overcome that trouble that she had at the start. Morning Matcha's a really nice horse. She's by a New York sire, so she's got that Stallion series available to her in New York. She can also run against Graded Stakes Company, as we saw here. It'd actually be interested to see them try her in another race at this level, because I think she could be the right price next time, and she definitely ran better than it seems in this Bed of Roses from last Saturday. Well, those are all the horses to watch this week. If you want to follow these horses moving forward, you can add them to your horse watch on DRF.com, or you can go into your notes feature in DRF Formulator or Timeform USPPs, make notes on these trips, and those written notes that you make will show up in the horses' running lines when they come back in the past performances for their next starts. So everyone, thanks for tuning in to Horses to Watch this week. I'll be back with another group of races to analyze next Wednesday.